Hi everyone, Breanne here from Pixite today, and I just want to welcome you to an all new tip of the month for April 2022, and it's going to be how to achieve different textiles or textures to different fabrics and clothing, or really anything. I'm going to probably be doing leather, and then I might do a rougher design on the hat, possibly a silk scarf. And then we have the leather jacket with possibly an insert for the lining. I might do something there. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm gonna start out with the khaki pants, and I'm gonna be using a lot of tools from our section that we have here. So basically, I'm not gonna be using too many fills, I don't think, although you can use them because they have built-in patterns. But today I'm gonna be talking about how to create that texture on your own, freehanding it with the tools from the library. So a really good tool that I do like to use is the paintbrush, because when you lower the opacity, so you lower the opacity quite a bit, you can play with it obviously to see what is working for you. Bring up the brush size, you get a really faint appearance. So it's really awesome for creating like almost a distressed look. So that's what I'm going to be doing here on the khakis. You see how I get those lines? It almost has the lines already that would be in your pants as creases or as a design, right? So that is what I am doing here. And I'm just going up, down to make that look to the pant. You can also go a little bit darker and add that crease up the middle if you want. Paintbrush on low opacity is just really awesome for texture, and like I say, it gives you those natural lines that kind of look really awesome and just work, right? Don't be afraid to experiment with some different colors if you want to create that distressing. Keep them like colored, but you can definitely add different tones, which can bring a whole new level to the distressing or to the pattern of your clothing. So that's what I'm doing right now. But definitely play with your brush size and opacity, as I always recommend, because the more you play with it, the more you might discover new ways to use the brushes, because they are very different depending on the opacity that you are on. So that was done with the paintbrush. I would like to kind of demonstrate how you can use different tools to create different effects. And there is another tool that I really love to use for creating textiles or patterns and clothing especially, and it is the marker tool. The important thing to remember is when you're using the marker tool is you're gonna wanna bring your opacity down, and you're gonna wanna play with that opacity. It's basically gonna be the theme of this creating texture moment that we're having, is playing with your opacity, and don't be afraid to play with your brush size. It's kind of, it's a learning curve, it really is. So let's say I wanna leave this shirt the same color and maybe add in a color. So I'm going to bring down, I'm gonna color match my shirt here. I used the pillow to fill, so it's gonna have darker towards, I tapped in the middle, so the shading is going towards the outer part of the shirt, which is fine. My opacity again is down on my brush. I might want to bring up my brush size a bit. Like I said, experimenting is key. Maybe a little bit more, maybe bring that down a little bit more. And start out light, and you just get this really cool look with the marker. It just adds this like layering effect effortlessly, and it works really good for highlighting the edges of things as well. And you can angle your brush and do a lot with it. So you can turn up that opacity a bit, turn down that brush size, and really get in those edges and make like almost a highlighted edge to your shirt. which just kind of brings, you know, visual interest to the piece, because now it's not just one dimensional, you're adding dimension. Now let's say we want to add another color and do something kind of like cool with the shirt. Maybe we want a little, you know, logo or a design in the middle. So you can do, and just beware, the more you layer the marker, it does fill up. So if you're gonna go back and forth, it's gonna eventually fill out, even on low opacity. And you can just make the shirt a little bit more interesting, and you can play with this as much as you want. You can use bright colors, you can do whatever you want. You can almost make like a tie-dye effect if you like. It is amazing for comic style works, and I probably use the marker more than anything when I'm coloring those types of things. And we're making an outfit here, so I'm gonna obviously try and keep everything going together here. I don't want it to look too, you know, off kilter. I want the pants to go with the shirt and the hat to go with the outfit. So essentially we're making a funky outfit here. And then if you want to make those folds a little bit more known, we can switch over to our airbrush, maybe just lower that opacity a bit, and you can just make it a little bit lighter between the dark spots to really show the curves in the shirt. Don't go overboard with the airbrush though. It's okay to use for highlighting, but we do want to keep that wonderful look that we achieved with the marker, right? So use one tool mostly to create the effect for each piece of clothing. So let's say I'm looking back at my pants and I decide, oh, I want it to be a little bit more distressed in the knees as you're going. Then you can take an even lighter color and go in and highlight it even further. There's no stopping you from going back and adjusting your clothes as you're going on when you have ideas. So just keep that in mind as well. Now I'm using this yellow at a very low opacity over it to create a new color. Creating a new color, a new almost like tie-dyed look to the shirt. Okay, so we did our shirt and we did our pants. So paintbrush for this, marker for this. Let's move over to our shoes and try something new with the shoes. Now there is a brush that I don't use very often that I think is underrated that you can use for a lot of things. But again, it's a very strong brush. I'm gonna use the sand brush. I'm gonna use it to distress these leather boots. It's a very strong brush, so you're gonna wanna play with your opacity and bring it down low. I actually used the metal fill to fill these boots, so I'm adding a little bit of grain very effortlessly. Okay, so with this brush, I'm gonna test. I'm gonna see my brush size and move it around, and it just makes like that dusty suede look. And look how strong that sand brush is. It is strong, isn't it? So we just want to bring down the opacity and just play, have fun playing. And if you want to add even just like a little bit more of that really distressed look, you can go a little bit lighter. You almost get like a little bit of a shine to the boot. Don't be afraid to use freehand, like to get through these lines and to make the lines seamless going all the way up. If you're looking at doing some distressing in here, it works a lot better being on freehand mode than if you were to try to get in between all those lines on your own. It can be a little bit, I don't want to say frustrating, but it could be a little bit tedious perhaps. So there's our boots. So again, paintbrush, marker, sand brush. So that's 3 different brushes that we've used so far. Now for the hat, I was thinking of using pencil. just because pencil, again, on low opacity has a lot of texture. So when I was playing around with these brushes when I first started coloring in Pigment, that was what I did. I played around with these opacities, and I learned very quickly that opacities play a significant role in texture and achieving different results. So let's do this again. I'm gonna make sure I'm on automatic this time for starting out. And you see how it almost makes like those natural indents in the hat already? So you could call this like that bumpy wool hat, like, you know, you get those wool hats. This could be a way to create wool right here, and it's very effortless. Like the opacities down on the brush size is up, and that's all I did. And then you just play with your colors to add that shading and that texture into it. I just want to create like almost like that highlighted bumpy hat look, and you get like that shine happening in the hat, right? And don't forget to shade, so don't, you know, add in your darker areas and then your lighter areas, and then that brings your eye in, and it gives your, whatever you're coloring, it gives it dimension. And we might sneak in and use the glitter or the laser for some highlighting on the buckles and the belts and such. So laser usually higher opacity. And then usually what I like to do is use like a little bit of a lighter color, and you can just kind of get a little buckle shine in there if you want. Same with down here, go automatic, and you can just kind of get that little bit of a buckle shine in there. Okay, so now let's color the belt. And the oil, again, like all these brushes are very strong, and you just have to play with the opacity. So let's do that again. And then I'm just going to very lightly add some highlights and distressing to this belt with the lighter end of the brown. And then I might go in and add some deeper shadows as well. I like that just the way it is. I barely even did anything there. I used the oil brush and smeared it around, and I think it looks great. Now, I'm gonna make this kind of a silk scarf, I think. We'll see how it goes. That was my idea when I originally picked this piece to color, because I did want to demonstrate silk. But silk can be a little bit tricky, because it's almost like making that little bit of transparency, right? So it can be a little bit tricky, but it doesn't mean that it's impossible. It's a one brush challenge here that I'm trying to do for all this. So for silk, it's either gonna be all airbrush. You know what, for the silk, let's do two, just to be fair, because I probably won't use the glitter brush for anything else. So the airbrush is a given. Let's use the airbrush and the glitter. We'll start it with the airbrush, and then we'll finish off our highlights with the glitter. It's a little bit of a cheat, but I think to create the effect, it would work better with that little bit of transparency from the glitter. So with silk, I think it's really important to highlight your edges. It's such a soft material, and it's so satiny that you really want to soften it up and keep it light and airy. So you got to get in with your shading too. You got to shade the right areas. I think it's just mostly creating a layering effect, which really attributes to the look of silk. It has this dimensional flow to it. It just falls, and some parts are a little bit darker, and then the parts that really hit the light are the lightest. I'm on freehand mode. We can always touch up the outer part not a big deal. I just think the glitter is really gonna add the edge for this silk scarf. And you can do this. I was actually gonna do a gown of silk, but I wanted to show other textiles because there's so many different ways to achieve these looks. And I really wanted to show a little bit of everything. I mean, silk is one thing, but to show how you can use all the brushes and to make these beautiful pieces is a whole nother story. So let's bring out that glitter and make it a little bit more transparent. Let's bring up the transparency a little bit. So I'm gonna lower my opacity, bring up my brush size, and I'm just gonna brush it on the edges. And you might not be able to see it when I zoom out, but when I'm close like this, you can see how it really does add dimension to the scarf, right? Okay, so let's just say for argument's sake that we can use the airbrush along with the main tool, but there's a main tool that we have to use for everything, because I think the airbrush is really useful in self-blending. So I don't want to just ignore that quality. We need something to blend these textures a little bit here. So we use the airbrush and the glitter for the silk. I think it looks great. So this is one way that you can achieve that, but don't be afraid to experiment and take it one step further too if you feel inspired to do so. Okay, so this is gonna be, I really wanted to do like a pin striping in that's why I did the pink lining, because I had a leather jacket before and it had that pin striping in it, so I was thinking of it. I think pastel would work very good for leather and for the liner that I'm looking to do. So with pastel, I play with the opacity a lot. This is a brush that is like my universal brush. I love the pastel brush. I use it a lot. So even just doing something like that, and remember, we can cheat and use airbrush because airbrush is good for blending and adding effects. So it's not really a cheat. So then I'm just gonna go in and just kind of lighten it up, because this would almost be like a silk interior too if it had that pin striping, right? So now let's do the jacket. Let's go back to the pastel brush because that's what we were using. And then just brush this. Brush it in different ways, but there's a thing that you can do to make texture. Like let's say if you have a rough jacket, you can do cross hatching, which makes with different colors, and it really just creates texture. So if you want to do that, you can do it in different colors and just bring your brush this way and then bring it, that way. And the pastel is good for this because it naturally blends. And then you get like that distressed look, right? So bring it this way, bring it that way. So you don't want to maybe like overdo it in certain instances. Like when you have distressing, it's partial to certain areas and you're going to want to blend it out a little bit too. So maybe go back in and just kind of go through it with a darker color for some edges, and it's just all about having fun and playing with what you can achieve. The more messy it is, almost the better it seems to and you can blend out parts that you don't want cross-hatched when you're done. And not every area has to be crossed. You can even just do lines in some areas. Like it's all about just getting that distressed look. I'm gonna be blending some of this out, I'll tell you that. your brush through it, but don't turn your opacity way down. You still want that texture from the cross hatching, but you just might want to blend it, you know, and there's nothing wrong with that. So use the pastel brush for that. And then I'm going to keep my pink liner, but what I'm going to do, okay, I'm on automatic, good. I'm just gonna do a little bit of blending. Make a little bit more shading in there. I'm not gonna worry too much about the glasses. It's not really a texture, more like a reflective surface, right? So we can do a lot with the glasses. I mean, if you want, let's have some fun with it. I'm gonna use a fill. I'm gonna use Bloom. I'm gonna bring down the opacity and I'm gonna get a bright, like orangey yellow. Just to make like that reflective look on the glasses. And I'll use the technical pen. And I'm just kind of adding some light reflections to the glasses itself. Playing with the opacity again is very important. When you're using the technical pen, you can see how it layers from using more opacity to less, right? It almost kind of layers like the marker in a way. So you just want to keep that in mind all the time. So let's go to the watch. I like the wood band look, so let's do that. I actually almost bought a couple wood looking bands and they are super cool looking watches. Opacity down, and let's make a wood band. I'm gonna keep it distressed. This is gonna be a simple one. It's not gonna be overly complicated at all. So I'm leaving those dark edges. I'm adding some lighter interior, and I am just going to town on it, just having fun. So I'm just layering it over and over again. Okay, so now let's go to our laser. And we're just gonna touch up this watch a little bit here and just give it a little bit of sheen and shine and all that good stuff. And we're pretty much done, guys. And that's all I would do, simple as that. So this was a lot of fun. You can see how many different ways that you can create textiles and textures. Really, the sky is the limit. I'm not gonna bore you with the last little bit because I'm just gonna touch it up a little bit and probably do some shading around the clothes just to kind of make it pop a little bit more. But this was the main point of this video. I hope that you guys found it very helpful. I love doing them with you. And if there's anything that you guys wanna see, please let us know. We love hearing from you. And don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons so you don't miss out on these tips and other awesome content that's being released all the time. Okay, take care everybody. See you next time. Bye-bye.